In today's video, we are going to be discussing how to and the importance of creating a seamless transaction process for your clients. This is going to be a step by step guide, some tips and tricks on how to not only do a great job, but go above and beyond so that you get more referrals from the transaction management process. So, before we jump into the content here, I want to make sure we hit on the struggle of focusing on the transaction process. And what I mean by that is, we have still got to remain constant in our follow-up and our income producing activity. Now, there can be a debate that the transaction management process can be income producing, and we will go over that in the next point here. But what you need to make sure is that if your transaction management process is not income producing, that we have to focus on income producing activity daily. We cannot spend all of our time on transaction management. If the transaction management process is holding you back from taking on more clients, and we have to figure out how to delegate and elevate or automate this transaction management process so that you can still deliver an awesome customer service experience, but you can continue to increase your income. This is the number one system or process or work, right? Or tasks that we can easily automate or delegate. Now, some of you may ask how, and we are going to talk through how to systemize this. It is more important than ever to systemize this process because this is a lengthy process. For some states, it's 50, 60, 90 days, right? For some states, it's a little bit quicker, but this is a very lengthy process that we can actually systemize so that we are only spending 1 to 5 hours a week on this, depending on how many transactions that you have under contract, so that we can go back to focusing on how to increase and scale our business. So it is possible to systemize it, even if you cannot actually systemize this in terms of hiring someone to do it for you or hiring an admin or hiring some sort of transaction management service. You can still systemize this in a way that you know exactly what you need to do very, very quickly and you know where you left off. There's nothing worse than spending 30 minutes to an hour on one transaction file trying to figure out where I left off in the first place. So keep in mind as we go through this, and towards the end here, we are going to talk about actually how to systemize this process. So, one, why the transaction process has to be a focus. Now, while I'm sitting here and saying we've got to focus on income producing activity, this is why you do have to make sure that your systems are intact if you do systemize or turn your transaction management process into a system. This is usually the most emotional piece of the transaction. There's a lot of excitement right in the beginning, and then there's no news, right? And then there's a lot of excitement, and then there's an inspection. So it's a large roller coaster that the buyer or seller goes on. And so it's really, really, really important that we remember to put ourselves in the shoes of that customer or of that client, right? This is not only the most emotional piece of the transaction, but this is also where we see a lot of speed bumps, right? Again, we've got inspections and contingencies and all of these different little speed bumps that do have the opportunity to completely derail our clients and derail us. And it is up to us to make sure that we keep that steady hand and we remind our clients of the end goal here, which is closing on the property that they want, or insert whatever their problem is and how we are going to solve it. This is also the last impression that we have on our buyer or seller. And so it doesn't matter. I'm sure some of you can relate to this, but it doesn't matter how long that we worked with them. Sometimes it's months, sometimes it's years that we've worked with someone to finally secure the property. There ends up being a large speed bump in the transaction. And then we don't end up getting referrals from that person because of that speed bump, even if that speed bump had nothing to do with us. And so it's very, very important that we keep that in mind so that we don't work so hard for these people to then encounter a speed bump that then throws everything off track. So then we now have somewhat of a severed relationship. And so there's a couple of things that we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen. One, making sure that we are solutions based instead of focusing too hard on the problem. I know we want to give our clients the space to vent when they are frustrated, and that is totally okay. But making sure that we are matching that venting session or matching whatever negativity may be coming with the solution to the problem is going to help you win and get over that speed bump or make that speed bump as small as possible. Making sure you're thinking of solutions before you have that phone call, right? Or making sure you're thinking through solutions while you're on that phone call is going to allow you to simmer your clients down and or tackle the solution with a settled mindset, right? Or with a steady mindset. And so the other situation is making sure that we go over all of the expectations at the very beginning once an offer is either submitted or accepted. This is the hardest thing for real estate agents. I understand, because you've secured the sale, you want to move on to the actual transaction management process, you want to move on to closing, you want to move on to the next client. This is the hardest thing for real estate agents to do, which is to slow down and set all of the expectations possible and all of the speed bumps. Now, don't be too negative and forewarn too much to where it comes off as a very negative mindset, but just making sure that we are setting the expectations that these are the typical bumps in the road and these are the typical solutions that help smooth those bumps over. And so this is where we can get ahead of a 100-day inspection report. How many first-time home buyers get that massive home inspection report and they freak out, and they're only freaking out because it's 100 pages. They haven't even looked at the report. But now they think, oh my gosh, there's so much wrong with my house. And we've not even explained that the majority of it is just a disclosure of how old something is or the current status of it, that there's nothing wrong with it, but it's just informative, right? So we can set that expectation from the very, very beginning, right? That is one of those speed bumps that we can smooth out before we even get there, of setting the expectation with the buyer of, hey, there is going to be a large inspection report, but I do not want you to panic. That is absolutely normal. What we are going to focus on is this inspection summary, or the things that may potentially cause a future problem, and then smooth out that bump there. And then when they get the inspection report, you now have a very minor speed bump instead of this really big one that might be difficult to get over. And so it's very important to think through your transaction process and all of the potential speed bumps so that we can get ahead of it very, very, very quickly. All right. And so in terms of the transaction management process, I like to narrow it down to 5 different cycles. And this is traditionally where the either speed bumps or the roller coaster lies, right? In the beginning, um, we've got the introduction, earnest money, scheduling, coordination of calendars and or contractors. This is where we are sending the contract to everyone, making sure everyone is properly opening the file, making sure everyone has the right contact information, scheduling inspections and things like that. And so this can bog down a lot of real estate agents. This can sometimes be outside of maybe negotiating repairs. This can be the most time suck activity of the inspection process. And I am here to tell you that you need to create a templated email situation and automations within your CRM. So you can actually, or maybe through Zapier. I'll go over a little bit of that in just a minute. But it is more important than ever that you create a series of templated emails. I'm going to pull up some here that you can rely on so that you are not always trying to create the trying to create emails over and over and over again. All right, so here's an example of what templated emails will look like. And now, templated emails, they are going to vary depending on your market, but they serve two purposes. One, it creates more efficiency in my life that I don't have to create this email over and over and over again. But also, and make sure that I'm not leaving out any information that I might potentially leave out if I am just trying to craft this email from scratch, right, or from memory. And so I want you to go through templated emails. You can be as detailed or as not detailed, as vague as you want. And so we actually have templated emails for a couple of different agents, depending on if they already have an attorney, if you're in an attorney state, or if they already know an inspector versus if they don't and they need a list of inspectors. And so we can kind of fine tune this email depending on your workflow, right? But it's important that you have templated emails. We have templated emails throughout the entire process of an inspection, for example, of when we are sending a contract over to the other agent, right? And so templated emails can save you a lot of time while also allowing you to make sure that you're not forgetting anything. I mentioned automations, templated emails, Zapier. And so I coach a lot of agents on Google Forms because there is a service called Zapier. And if you are not familiar with Zapier, Zapier is an incredible automation company that basically connects one piece of technology to another, and it can fire based off of different actions. And what I mean by this is, for example, we use a lot of Google Forms. And so when a Google form is submitted, depending on what is in that Google form, Zapier will then fire off to my CRM and change the stage to under contract. It will send them the templated email. It will send them a video email congratulating them on going under contract, right? There are these different automations that we can include in our transaction process that, one, increase the satisfaction of our customer, which means an increased likelihood of a referral. But this also can save me a lot of time, especially for the monotonous tasks of things like just simply changing the stage in the CRM, right? I can take you through an example of what a Zap looks like for an under contract client of ours, or what our under contract system looks like, and one that I've built for another agent. Okay, so here is an example of Zapier and what happens when we have a new form response. It is going to send an email. It's going to change the stage into our follow-up boss, or change the stage of follow-up boss to under contract. It's going to create certain tasks based off of certain dates that are in the forms, things like earnest money due, things like and contingencies. It's going to create all of these tasks, and then again, we can then filter what is in that form to then send another email as a reminder to the agent and or the client to create a Google Drive folder. Again, a very monotonous task of making sure that all of our documents get into our Google Drive folder, as well as finding and moving a file once that file goes from under contract to close. So this is Zapier. This is an example of how we can actually automate this process. This actually saves about an hour of the hour and 20 minutes it takes to open a contract on average, right? These are little things that we are either having to remember or that we are having to try and systemize, right? And so this is a good way to do that. And so that is very helpful for the first stage here, which is this introduction, earnest money, scheduling, coordination of calendars and contractors. And then the second process in the transaction process that or the second cycle is this due diligence slash inspection process. Now, this process is more important than ever to set the expectation, and then you will be smooth sailing from there. If you don't set the expectation, you're going to run into speed bump after speed bump after speed bump. A couple of expectations can depend on your local market. So in the market that I'm in, for example, there are certain things that are a seller required repair and that are not a seller required repair. And there's some gray area there. And so what I do is I make sure that I have the conversation before the inspection happens on what we traditionally see a seller actually repair in our market and what we don't. Right. And then I can go ahead and set that expectation of what is the standard for what is normally asked for and what is normally repaired and what isn't. Okay. So this is a huge speed bump here that we have to navigate over. And I think, or I know that setting expectations is going to help you do that. The next is going to be the finance process if there is financing involved. Now, this is one of those speed bumps that we have a lack of control over, but how we can gain back that control and or make this speed bump a little bit smoother is by making sure we are documenting the fact that we are continuously calling, emailing, and texting the lender for updates. So we have an automation that sets a calendar invite that we reach out to the lender once a week for an update, right? And sometimes that gets to twice a week as we get closer to closing. We want to make sure that if the lender does screw up, which usually they don't, hopefully they don't, but we do not want the lender to come back on us and say that it's because we did not follow up or that we missed an update here or there. We want to gain back that control because worst case scenario, if something goes astray with financing and the lender cannot close on time, we are not at fault, right? Because we've done our job in continuously following up. With that lender and then with our client when there is no news there, right? Then the next cycle is closing day / week. Again, can be stressful, can be exciting. Make sure all the ducks are in a row ahead of time. Anticipate things going wrong, not from a negativity standpoint, but from a solutions based standpoint. Make sure your final walkthrough isn't the morning of. Make sure it's the day before, just in case we're missing keys or missing garage openers, and we can track that down so that we can make the close date as smooth as possible and as exciting as possible. And then the last part of the close process, which is the one that everyone forgets, is post closing. What happens after closing? And I want you to make sure you set up some sort of system automation reminder for 6 months and a year out so that you can communicate on what we call a home anniversary, right? This is going to be huge for your referral process and asking for referrals. There are creative ways around gifting and or outreach once your client has closed so that you can ask for and obtain more referrals. Now, it is important that in each cycle we make sure we are updating the client on what we do. There is no worse phone call. Actually, there are worse phone calls in the transaction process, but it sucks for you to work all week long on the administrative process for your client to call you and rip you a new one because they've not heard anything, right? And in hindsight, it sucks even more because you actually have been working for them and now they're crawling you because you've not updated them. It's so important that you time block at least a few hours a week. You can do all of your contract management in that said time block, but that you are communicating to your client. I am so tired of real estate agents saying no news is good news. That's fine, but we still need to report the no news, right? The transaction process is oftentimes out of our hands. It's in the inspection's hands. It's in the attorney or the title company's hands. It's in the lender's hands. However, we can be the liaison. It's actually our job to be the liaison to actually report that there is no news, right? I spoke to the lender and he said there is no updates, right? Or there are no updates. No news is good news. I spoke to the title company and the title's good and there's no more updates, right? The inspection process, we're good. The contractors are there. I'll follow back up next week once we can get the invoices, right? Please, please, please report back to your client, even if there is no news, right? You want to make sure that you are following up with them over and over and over again so that they are informed, right? I know that you do this for an everyday job, right? Or an everyday career, but for some of these people, they only buy or sell real estate either once in their lifetime or once every couple of years. And so they're just sitting around twiddling their thumbs talking about this house every single day, right? And they are waiting anxiously and excitedly awaiting for updates from you. Now, we have to make sure, in order for us to go above and beyond in this process, we have got to make sure we systemize it. We've got to input it all into a system. I talked about it earlier, right? It is super, super important to not only time block, but to implement systems into our business so that this can go from taking a ton of time to hardly any time at all, right? I showed you this one system that saved me an hour of the hour and 20-minute intro time that it normally takes to open a contract. And what we want to do is we want to write down our entire process, every single thing you can think of what you do in the transaction process. And then I want you to go through the exercise again so that you can write down the different forms of contact that you need. And what I mean by that, for example, is when a new contract comes in, I circulate to all parties. That's one action item. Well, I want you to break that down to who you circulate that contract to. You send it to the lender, you send it to the title company and or the attorney, you send it to the client, right? I want you to create 3 separate action items for each of those points of contact because I don't want you to forget. I don't want you to see circulate contract on a checklist and then you send it to the listing agent or the other agent and then you think that you're done because you get distracted, you get a phone call and then you go back and you say, well, I circulated it. No, you didn't. You didn't send it to the other parties that you need to send it to. Once you have all of your cycles planned out, all of your points of contact planned out, we are going to then invest, they are very cheap, into a project management tool, right? And what this project management tool is going to do, this may look overwhelming or it may not, but what we are going to do is we are then going to be able to quickly set up a system of checklist items. And so for this specific team, what we did is we created them an entire checklist, right? That includes all of the basic descriptions that they need. So when they receive a phone call, they can click, and this is normally everything that they need from an information standpoint. Then we're going to make sure we have key dates that then syndicate over to our Google Calendar. And then we've got all of those checklist items that I mentioned you writing out in the entire process, right? And it goes on and on and on and on and on. It goes on for days. And so what this allows me to do is no longer work from memory. Anytime something goes under contract, what they do is they copy the card. They will then copy and paste the address and the last name of that client. And then we go to work, right? We fill out all of our information and we start on our checklist items, right? This saves you so much time. Again, just like the templated email situation, this not only saves you a ton of time, but this keeps you on track. It keeps you accurate. It keeps you focused and it allows you to not miss something, right? There's nothing worse than missing something in this very basic checklist because you didn't send the contract here or you didn't send the contract there. I talked to an agent the other day that didn't even we're in an attorney state, so you've got to send the contract to an attorney. They completely forgot to send it to the attorney, right? It wasn't in their checklist item. Well, you best believe that they added it to their checklist item so that they didn't miss this the next time, right? And now they will never, ever, ever forget to send it to the attorney because it is a simple checklist item that we can check to make sure it gets sent to the attorney, right? And this also allows you to save time when you are time blocking your weekly update, that you are able to now understand where you've left off and everything that you've checked off, so that when you update your client, you're not having to search through the file for an hour trying to figure out what the last update was. Or better yet, where you actually left off in the process. Now you know where you left off and you can properly update them. So this is going to save you a ton of time. It's also going to save you a ton of stress. How many of you at 2 o'clock in the morning shoot up out of bed and say, oh my gosh, did I do this? I want to make sure that I did this. Or better yet, in terms of a contingency date, did you shoot out of your bed and say, oh my gosh, when was that inspection contingency date? I know that I wrote 2 weeks in the contract, but I feel like it's been 2 weeks. And in reality, it's only been like 9 or 10 days. And so this process and making sure we get the dates on our Google Calendar, making sure we're setting up reminders that tag our phone or that ping our phone, that ping our email, making sure we've got a proper checklist in place. This is going to not only save you so much time, but save you stress. And we are now able to spend the amount of time and stress that we have saved on income producing activity and actually servicing more clients. Right? This is how we are going to 2x and 3x our business, is by properly putting in the foundation of not only systemizing this contract to close process, but now we are also able to provide an awesome customer service to our clients, because we are able to report back to them with more updates than we usually would and understand exactly where we left off so that we can properly update them, right? That's going to be huge in your business. So this system is called Trello, this piece of technology. It's a project management tool. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And then when you get to the point where you still feel like, even with a project management tool like Trello, you still are getting bogged down by the transaction management process, and you now need to look into a VA service. There are awesome, awesome, awesome virtual assistant companies that will train transaction coordinators on your technology that you already have in place, and then will implement them into your business. It can even start on a part-time basis. You don't have to hire a full-time admin. I know a lot of agents, when they get to this point, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I have to pay a $40,000 to $60,000 a year transaction manager, and I don't have 40 hours worth of this work. However, I need to buy back some of my time." There are awesome companies. One is called Cyberbacker. It is a virtual assistant company that was created by real estate agents for real estate agents, and they quite literally will train a transaction backer that will assist you on a part-time basis. You don't have to train them. Well, you have to train them a little bit, right? But you are able to interview 5 to 10 of them. They will help you select one, they will train them for you, and then they will implement them into your business. I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that you are able to buy back some of your time and turn your transaction management process into a system that saves you time, saves you stress, and actually gets you more referrals because of the customer service you are able to implement into your business using these systems. If you'd like to learn more tips and tricks on how to scale your business, please check out the rest of my videos. If you'd like to learn a little bit more on how I can actually customize something like this and implement this into your business along with other scaling systems, there is a link in the description below. You can book a time slot on there. We can jump on a call. I would love to go over how I can actually save you time so that you can spend more time on income producing activity and actually building a life you love because you've been able to scale your real estate business. So like I mentioned, click on the link below. I'd love to meet you face to face. See you soon.